The velvet upholstery of the Mafia King's throne felt like ice against my skin as my stepmother knelt on the marble floor, her forehead pressed against his leather shoes. "Please, great king, the girl is a thief, a stray I threw out for your own protection," she wailed, her voice cracking in the hollow silence of the cathedral-sized hall. I didn't look at her. I adjusted the 5-carat diamond on my ring finger, the light catching the sharp edges of the stone. My husband, the man the world called the Black Lion, didn't move a muscle. He simply rested his hand on my shoulder, his grip a silent promise of destruction. "You threw out my wife," he whispered, the sound vibrating through the floorboards like a low-frequency growl. "Which means you threw out the queen of this city." He reached for the suppressed pistol on the side table, and the click of the safety echoing against the high ceilings sounded like a judge's gavel. 3 months ago, I was standing in the pouring rain on the curb of Gangnam, my only possession stuffed into a trash bag that was rapidly leaking. The front door of my father's house had slammed shut with a finality that shook the windows, and my stepmother's face had appeared behind the glass, her lips curled into a triumphant sneer. I had nothing but a damp business card I'd scavenged from my father's trash, a card for a man he feared more than death itself. I didn't go to a shelter. I didn't go to the police. I walked 3 miles in soaked sneakers to the most fortified skyscraper in Seoul and told the guards I was there to offer the Black Lion the one thing he couldn't buy, my father's ledger. This is how a girl with a trash bag ended up wearing a crown of thorns and blood. I stood in the lobby of the Titan Group, water dripping from my hair onto the polished granite. The security guard reached for my arm, his fingers digging into my skin. I didn't flinch. I held up the charred corner of a black leather book. "Tell Kang Ho that the daughter of the man he's hunting is here with his grocery list," I said, my voice steady despite the rattling in my chest. The guard's grip loosened. He spoke into his radio, his eyes darting to my bruised cheek, the parting gift from my stepmother's heavy hand. 2 minutes later, I was in a glass elevator ascending 60 floors into the belly of the beast. The doors opened to a room that smelled of expensive tobacco and old money. Kang Ho sat behind a desk of solid obsidian, his black shirt unbuttoned at the collar, revealing the edge of a tattoo that crawled up his neck like a serpent. He didn't look up from his tablet. "You have 60 seconds, he said, his voice a dry rasp. I walked to the center of the room and dropped the trash bag. It made a wet, pathetic sound. My stepmother threw me out. "My father is hiding his assets in a Swiss shell company called Blue Iris. I have the account numbers memorized." He looked up then. His eyes weren't human, they were 2 pieces of flint ready to strike. He stood, his frame blocking out the city lights behind him. He walked toward me, the air in the room turning heavy, making it hard to swallow. He stopped inches from me, his scent, sandalwood and gunpowder, filling my senses. He reached out, his thumb grazing the bruise on my jaw. I didn't pull away. I leaned into the touch, my eyes locked on his. "And what do you want for this information?" he asked. I didn't ask for money. I didn't ask for a place to stay. "I want to be the person who holds the match when you burn their world down," I replied. A slow, lethal smile spread across his face. He picked up a gold fountain pen and slid a single sheet of paper across the obsidian. It wasn't a contract for information. It was a marriage license. "My father's board of directors requires me to have a wife to solidify the merger," he said, his eyes tracking the pulse in my neck. "If you sign this, you aren't just a snitch. You're a partner. You get the protection of my name and I get the keys to your father's vault." I grabbed the pen. My hand didn't shake as I scrawled my name in ink that looked like dried blood. I was no longer a runaway. I was a weapon in a tailored suit. The first complication arrived before the ink was even dry. The office doors burst open and Kang Ho's lead enforcer, a man with a jagged scar across his nose, rushed in. "Boss, the father's men just hit the safe house. They're looking for the girl. They don't know she's here yet, but they've put a price on her head that's making the streets go crazy." Kang Ho didn't look at the man. He looked at me, his hand traveling from my jaw to the back of my neck, pulling me closer until I could feel the heat radiating from his chest. "Let them look," he whispered. "By morning, the entire city will know she's the only person they can't touch." He turned back to the enforcer. "Assemble the convoy. We're going to my father-in-law's house for a late-night chat." The elevator ride down felt like the drop of a guillotine. Kang Ho handed me a heavy, silk-lined coat, its weight grounding me. As we hit the garage, the sight of 12 black SUVs idling, their headlights cutting through the exhaust fumes, made my heart hammer against my ribs. This wasn't a marriage, it was a declaration of war. I stepped into the lead car, the leather smelling of a new life. As we pulled out into the neon glare of Seoul, I saw a black sedan tailing us, its headlights off. "We have company," I said, my fingers gripping the door handle. Kang-ho didn't even look back. He pulled a heavy handgun from the glove box and checked the magazine. "Good," he said. "I hate a quiet wedding night." The sedan accelerated, its bumper slamming into ours with a scream of twisting metal. The impact sent my head snapping toward the window, the world blurring into a smear of city lights and gray concrete. Kang-ho didn't touch the brakes. He slammed his foot on the gas, the engine roaring like a wounded beast. He swerved, the tires shrieking as we drifted across 3 lanes of traffic. The black sedan stayed glued to our tail, a muzzle flash illuminating its interior. A bullet shattered the rear windshield, glass raining down like ice. I ducked, my hands over my head, but Kang-ho didn't even flinch. He steered with one hand, his eyes fixed on the rearview mirror, waiting for the perfect gap in the late-night traffic. "Get down on the floor," he commanded, his voice as calm as a summer lake. I did as I was told, my cheek pressed against the expensive floor mats. I heard the window power down. The cold wind whipped into the car, followed by the rhythmic, deafening bark of Kang-ho's weapon. 3 shots. The sound of a tire blowing out behind us was followed by a horrific screech of metal grinding against the guardrail. I peered over the seat just in time to see the sedan flip, a fireball erupting as it tumbled into the Han River. Kang-ho didn't slow down. He rolled the window back up and adjusted his cuffs. We arrived at my father's estate 20 minutes later. The iron gates were locked, but the lead SUV didn't stop. It plowed through the metal as if it were made of paper, the sound of the crash echoing through the manicured gardens. We stopped in front of the marble fountain, the water shimmering under the security lights. Kang-ho stepped out and opened my door. He offered his hand. I took it, my fingers interlocking with his. We walked up the stairs, the guards at the door dropping their weapons the moment they saw the black lion's crest on the convoy. The front door opened before we reached it. My father stood there, his face pale, his silk robe flapping in the wind. Behind him, my stepmother clutched a glass of wine, her eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and growing dread. "Kang-ho, what is the meaning of this? Why is my daughter with you?" my father stammered. I stepped forward, the silk of my new coat rustling. I didn't look like the girl they'd thrown out. I looked like the person who was about to inherit their sins. "She's not your daughter anymore," Kang-ho said, his voice carrying across the lawn like a death sentence. "She's my wife. And we're here to discuss the Blue Iris account." My father's knees buckled. He grabbed the doorframe for support, his eyes darting to the trash bag Kang-ho's men were now carrying toward the house. My stepmother's glass hit the floor, shattering into 1,000 pieces. She looked at me, her lips trembling. You told him? You promised you'd never tell," she shrieked. I didn't answer. I walked past them into the foyer, my heels clicking on the tile I used to scrub. I headed straight for the portrait of my mother hanging in the hallway. I took it off the wall, revealing the small wall safe hidden behind it. I dialed the code, the date of my mother's death. The safe clicked open. Inside wasn't money. It was a single digital drive wrapped in a black velvet cloth. I turned back to the room, the drive held high. "The ledger was just the hook," I said, looking my father in the eye. "This is the real weight." Kang-ho took the drive from my hand, his fingers lingering on mine. He turned to his men. "Take them to the basement. We have a lot of numbers to verify." As my father and stepmother were dragged away, their pleas for mercy filling the house, Kang-ho turned to me. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was the diamond ring. He slid it onto my finger, the weight of it a physical seal on our pact. "You did well," he said. But as I looked at the ring, I realized the man I'd married hadn't told me everything. There was a photo in the safe I hadn't shown him. A photo of Kang-ho's father and my mother together 30 years ago. If you believe that the secrets of the past are the only thing that can truly break a king, hit the like button so this story reaches the people who know that every crown has a price. I tucked the photo into the inner pocket of my coat, the paper feeling like a hot coal against my ribs. Kang-ho was watching me, his eyes narrowing. He sensed a shift in the air, a secret I wasn't ready to share. "What else was in there?" he asked, stepping closer, his presence filling the foyer. I didn't blink. I forced a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Just memories I'd rather forget," I lied. He stared at me for a long beat, the silence stretching until it felt like it would snap. "Memories are dangerous in this house," he said. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we move the assets." He walked away, but I saw the way he gripped his gun. He didn't trust me anymore. I sat in my old bedroom, the walls feeling like they were closing in. The house was quiet now, the screams from the basement muffled by the thick floors. I pulled the photo out. On the back, in my mother's elegant script, were the words, "The lion's cub belongs to the rose." I realized then that my marriage wasn't a coincidence. Kang Ho hadn't picked me because I had the ledger. He'd picked me because of who I was. I wasn't just his wife. I was his blood. The room suddenly felt ice cold. If we were related, this marriage was a sin that could destroy his empire and my life. I heard a floorboard creak outside my door. I shoved the photo under the mattress and stood up. The door handle turned slowly, the moonlight casting a long shadow across the carpet. I grabbed a heavy glass vase from the nightstand, my breath hitching in my throat. The door swung open, but it wasn't Kang Ho. It was the enforcer with the scarred nose. He held a finger to his lips, his eyes darting to the hallway. "You need to leave," he whispered. "I just saw the DNA results Kang Ho's doctor sent to his phone. He knows about the photo. And he's not coming here to sleep." I looked at the window, the 30-foot drop to the rose bushes below. I had to choose, the king or my life. The scarred enforcer Jean didn't wait for my answer. He grabbed my wrist and pulled me toward the service stairs, his grip urgent and trembling. "He's already in the study. He's calling the board. In his world, a mistake like this is purged with fire," he hissed. We flew down the narrow steps, the smell of damp concrete and old laundry filling the air. We reached the kitchen, the silver appliances gleaming like surgical tools under the dim moonlight. Jean shoved a set of keys into my hand. "The gray sedan in the back. Don't use the lights until you hit the main road. Go to the address on the keychain. It's a safe house he doesn't use anymore." I didn't ask why he was helping me. I didn't have time. I ran through the back door, the cold night air hitting my face like a slap. I found the sedan and fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking so hard they felt like they belonged to someone else. The engine turned over with a soft purr. I looked up at the master bedroom window. A light flickered on. A silhouette, tall, broad, unmistakable, stood behind the curtain. He was looking for me. I shifted into gear and rolled down the gravel driveway, the silence of the car feeling like a held breath. I hit the main road and slammed my foot down. The city blurred into a smear of neon and gray. I reached for the keychain, squinting in the dim light of the dashboard. The address was for an old warehouse district by the docks. As I drove, my mind raced. If Kang Ho knew the truth, why hadn't he killed me in the foyer? Why let Jean help me? I checked the rearview mirror. No headlights. No sirens. Just the empty, rain-slick streets of a city that didn't care if I lived or died. I arrived at the warehouse an hour later, the scent of salt and rotting wood heavy in the air. The safe house was a loft hidden above a shipping office. I climbed the rusted fire escape, the metal groaning under my weight. I unlocked the heavy steel door and stepped inside. The room was empty except for a single chair, a laptop, and a bottle of scotch. I sat on the floor, my back against the cold brick, and pulled out the photo. I looked at the man standing next to my mother. He looked exactly like Kang Ho, but his eyes were softer, his smile genuine. I opened the laptop. It wasn't password protected. The screen flickered to life, displaying a folder labeled Project Rose. I clicked it open. My heart stopped. It wasn't a DNA report. It was a series of wiretap transcripts between my father and Kang Ho's father. They hadn't been enemies. They had been partners in a human trafficking ring that my mother had tried to expose. The photo wasn't a secret of blood, it was a secret of betrayal. My mother hadn't been in love with the Black Lion's father. She had been his prisoner. And Kang Ho wasn't my brother. He was the son of the man who had destroyed my mother's life. I realized then that I wasn't a weapon he was using. I was the final piece of his revenge. If you think that a daughter should finish what her mother started, no matter who stands in her way, hit the like button so this story reaches those who believe the truth is worth more than a crown. The transcripts detailed the night my mother died. It wasn't an accident. My father had sold her to the syndicate to cover his gambling debts. I felt a cold, hard knot form in my stomach. The man I had married was the son of her tormentor, and the man who raised me was her murderer. I wasn't just caught between two lions, I was sitting in a den of monsters. I heard a soft rhythmic tapping at the door. Tap, 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 tap. It was a code. I grabbed the scotch bottle by the neck, my knuckles white. "Open the door, Rose," a voice called out. It wasn't Jean. It was Kang Ho. I walked to the door and swung it open, the bottle raised. He stood there, his coat covered in rain, his eyes dark and unreadable. He didn't look angry. He looked exhausted. "You found the folder," he said, stepping into the room without waiting for an invitation. He walked to the window and looked out at the dark water. "My father killed your mother because she was going to testify. Your father watched it happen for a stack of cash. I've spent 10 years building this empire just to reach the night where I could end them both. I stared at his back, the bottle still clutched in my hand. And me? Am I just part of the cleanup? I asked, my voice trembling. He turned around then, his face illuminated by a passing ship's light. I married you because you were the only person with a reason to hate them more than I do, he said. But I didn't expect the ledger to be real. I didn't expect you to be so much like her. He walked toward me, his hand reaching out. I stepped back, the scotch bottle hitting the brick wall and shattering. You lied to me, I hissed. You used me as bait. I saved you from a house that was about to become a tomb, he countered, his voice rising. The board of directors is already moving. My father's old loyalists know what's on that drive. They aren't coming for the money anymore. They're coming to kill the only two people who can put them in prison. He grabbed my shoulders, his grip firm but not painful. We have 4 hours until sunrise. By then we either have the board in handcuffs, or we're at the bottom of the river. Which do you want? I looked at the laptop, at the names of the men who had hurt my mother. I looked at the man who had her father's eyes but a different soul. Give me a gun, I said. Kang Ho didn't hesitate. He pulled a compact 9mm from his waistband and handed it to me. The metal was warm from his body, the weight of it a grim anchor. Jean is waiting at the docks with the transport, he said, checking his watch. The board is meeting at the private terminal at Incheon. They're planning to flee to Macau with the remaining assets. We hit them there, we end the cycle. We ran down the fire escape, the rain turning into a torrential downpour that blurred the world into a smear of gray and black. We drove in silence, the speed dial hovering at 120. The city fell away, replaced by the industrial sprawl of the airport. As we approached the private hangar, I saw the lights of a Gulfstream jet idling on the tarmac. 3 black SUVs were parked in a semicircle around the boarding stairs. There they are, Kang Ho whispered, killing the lights and rolling the car to a stop behind a stack of shipping containers. Jean will take the left flank. You stay with me. Do not fire unless I do. We need them alive for the confession. We crept through the shadows, the sound of the jet engines drowning out our footsteps. I saw my father. He was standing by the stairs, clutching a briefcase, his eyes darting around like a trapped rat. Beside him was the head of the board, an old man with white hair and a face like a wrinkled grape. They were arguing, their voices lost in the whine of the turbines. Kang Ho signaled Jean with a low whistle. Suddenly, the hangar's floodlights flared to life, blinding us. I knew you couldn't resist a final show, Kang Ho, a voice boomed over the PA system. It was my stepmother. She was standing on the balcony of the control tower, a rifle in her hands. She wasn't the trembling woman from the foyer, she was the one who had orchestrated the fallout. The board doesn't work for the king anymore, she shouted. They work for the highest bidder. And I've already sold your head to the Macau syndicate. The SUV doors flew open and a dozen men in tactical gear stepped out, their rifles leveled at us. We were boxed in, the jet bridge our only cover. Kang Ho pushed me behind a steel crate just as the air erupted with lead. The sound was a continuous roar, the concrete around us chipping and sparking. Jean, suppressive fire. Kang Ho roared into his radio. A burst of fire from the left flank momentarily pushed the gunman back. Kang Ho leaned out and fired 3 precise shots, taking out the floodlights. The world plunged back into chaos and shadows. Go for the jet, he yelled. If they take off, we lose everything. I ran, the wind catching my coat, the gun heavy in my hand. I reached the stairs just as my father tried to scramble up. He looked at me, his face twisted with a pathetic, desperate greed. The briefcase rose. It has the codes. We can start over in Macau. I didn't look at the briefcase. I looked at the man who had sold my mother. I raised the gun. My hand didn't shake. You don't get to start over, I said. I didn't pull the trigger. I swung the butt of the gun into his temple, and he collapsed onto the stairs, the briefcase spilling open to reveal stacks of useless counterfeit bills. He'd been played by the board just as much as I had. I looked up at the control tower. My stepmother was aiming at Kang Ho. He was pinned behind a fuel truck, trapped in the crosshairs. I didn't think. I didn't plan. I aimed at the glass of the tower and emptied the magazine. The glass shattered and she fell back, the rifle clattering to the floor. Kang Ho used the distraction to lunge for the boarding stairs. He grabbed the head of the board by the throat and slammed him against the fuselage. The confession, Kang Ho hissed. Now. Subscribe if you believe that the loudest screams are the ones that come from the people who thought they were untouchable. The old man blubbered, his pride vanishing the moment he felt the cold steel of Kang Ho's knife against his jugular. It was all in the Blue Iris account. The names, the dates, the buyers. Please don't kill me. Kang Ho didn't pull the trigger. He pulled a recorder from his pocket and clicked it off. I don't need to kill you, he said. The police are already at the gate. And the Macau syndicate doesn't like people who fail to deliver. He looked at me, the rain washing the blood and soot from his face. For the first time I saw the man behind the king. The sirens filled the air, a blue and red strobe light dancing across the tarmac. The board was led away in chains, my father and stepmother among them. As the sun began to peek over the horizon, painting the sky in bruises of purple and gold, Kang Ho walked over to me. He took the empty gun from my hand and tucked it away. It's over, he said. I looked at the jet, at the city, at the ring on my finger. What happens now? I asked. The marriage was a lie. The ledger was a hook. What's left? He looked at me, his eyes softer than I'd ever seen them. The throne is empty, he said. And I don't want to sit on it alone. The Titan Group needs a CEO who actually cares about the people beneath the skyscrapers. And I need a wife who isn't afraid to shoot at the world for me. He held out his hand, his palm open. I looked at the sunrise, then at the man who had helped me find the truth. I didn't take his hand. I walked past him toward the car. We have a lot of work to do, Kang Ho, I said over my shoulder. And I want a new contract. This time I'm the one who sets the terms. He laughed, a real genuine sound, and followed me into the light. The Titan headquarters felt different now. The obsidian desk was gone, replaced by a warm mahogany. I sat in the high-back chair, the city of Seoul spread out beneath me like a map of possibilities. Kang Ho stood by the window, his hand resting on my shoulder. We had spent the last 2 months dismantling the syndicate, turning the Titan Group into a legitimate force for change. The board was in prison and my father's house had been converted into a shelter for women, the Rose Foundation. But as I looked at the final audit on the screen, a single line of text caught my eye. It was an outgoing payment made 3 days ago to a private investigator in Switzerland. The subject, the second child. I felt a chill travel down my spine. I looked up at Kang Ho, his expression unreadable. What is this? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He didn't look away from the skyline. Your mother didn't just have you, Rose? He said. The wiretaps mentioned a second child born in the safe house before she was taken. A boy. I felt the room tilt. If there was a brother out there, he was the true heir to the mess we'd inherited. Why didn't you tell me? I demanded, standing up, the mahogany desk feeling like a barrier between us. Because he was sold to a family in the U.S., Kang Ho said, finally turning to face me. And 3 days ago he touched down in Seoul. He's looking for the people who destroyed his mother. And he doesn't know we're the ones who cleaned it up. He thinks we're the ones who killed her. I looked at the security feed for the lobby. A young man was standing at the reception desk. He had my mother's eyes. And he was holding a grenade. Subscribe if you want to see what happens when the past doesn't just haunt you. It walks through the front door with a detonator. I grabbed my coat and ran for the elevator, Kang Ho right behind me. Jean locked down the lobby. Do not engage, he roared into his radio. The elevator felt like it was moving in slow motion. I watched the screen as the young man, my brother, looked directly into the camera. He wasn't there for money. He was there for blood. The doors opened, and the lobby was a sea of terrified employees and frozen guards. I stepped out, my hands raised. Leo? I called out. The boy turned, his thumb hovering over the pin. Who are you? He spat. I'm your sister, I said. And the man behind me is the one who saved me. He didn't lower the grenade. Everyone in this building is a liar, he said. And I'm here to stop the lies. The silence in the lobby was deafening. I could hear the rhythmic ticking of the lobby clock, the heavy breathing of the guards, the distant hum of traffic. I took a step forward, my heart hammering against my ribs. Leo, please. Look at the photo in my pocket, I said, reaching slowly into my coat. It's the only thing I have left of her. I pulled out the photo of our mother. He squinted, his eyes flickering from me to the paper. His thumb wavered. Kang Ho stepped beside me, his presence a shield. We've been looking for you, Kang Ho said. We have the transcripts. We have the truth. Just put it down. Leo's eyes filled with tears, a raw, jagged grief breaking through his anger. They told me she died hating me, he whispered. They told me she sold me. I shook my head, my own tears finally falling. She loved you more than her own life, I said. She died so we could be free. He looked at the grenade, then at us. With a shaking hand, he replaced the pin and let the weapon fall to the marble floor. I didn't wait. I ran to him, pulling my brother into a hug that felt like 20 years of lost time. Kang Ho stood back, his hand on his heart, a silent witness to the end of the war. We sat in the office as the sun set, the three of us, the queen, the king, and the lost heir. The cycle was finally broken. The Titan Group wasn't just a business anymore, it was a family. As I looked at Leo and Kang Ho, I realized that the trash bag I'd carried into this building hadn't just been filled with a ledger. It had been filled with the seeds of a new world. We had burnt the old one down, and from the ashes, we had built something that actually mattered. I leaned my head on Kang Ho's shoulder, my hand in my brother's. We were finally home.